Today I am making chicken chips and gravy, which is considered one of the ultimate comfort foods. And I'm going to give it a little bit of a local or Australian spin by making homemade chicken salt for the chicken salt chippies. This recipe has a lot of homemade elements, from the homemade garlic butter to the homemade chips to the homemade chicken salt and to that homemade gravy, but I can assure you it is worth it. There's a little bit of patience needed when making this, but you will be left with the tastiest and juiciest chicken chips and gravy that you will be wanting to go back for more every single time. So to get started, we're going to start by roasting 4 bulbs of garlic that we need for that homemade garlic butter to spread all over our chicken. So I've got 4 garlic bulbs and I'm just going to slice the tip off them just to expose those garlic cloves, just exactly like this. And this recipe is going to make a lot of garlic butter. You might not necessarily need it for the whole chicken, but you can store that in the fridge, and I have so many recipes on my website where I use this homemade garlic butter. So don't be alarmed if it uses so much butter and herbs and garlic, because there is plenty of use for it. And this is sort of my cheat or quick way to confit garlic, because what we're doing is we're not individually peeling those cloves or tearing them away from the bulb. We're just keeping them whole. I'm going to grab a sheet of alfoil. I'm going to pop them on here, and then I'm just going to drizzle them with olive oil. Flavor them with some salt, not too much, and pepper. And then we're going to wrap them up, and we want to make sure that those exposed cloves are covered. If you're using a baking dish, just use one that has a lid, or that you can put alfoil on top. And then we're going to roast them for about an hour in the oven until they're soft and caramelized, and we can do that beautiful garlic squeeze. While my garlic roasts, I'm going to start prepping those chips for the homemade chips. And because I am about to burst, I'm 35 weeks pregnant, you'll probably notice that I have been making chips quite a lot, but they are just such a pregnancy craving of mine at the moment. So I'm just going to use a russet potato here, and I'm going to peel them with a vegetable peel. You don't have to peel your potatoes when making chips. It really just comes down to personal preference, if you want them to have that skin on them or if you don't. But do I keep the skin on them? I'm going to peel the potatoes, and that really comes down to personal preference. Some people like potatoes. Jim is distracting me with the cat. I'm going to peel my potatoes, and this really comes down to personal preference. Some people like their chips with the potato skins on them. I personally prefer them without. So I'm just going to get a vegetable peeler and peel all of that skin off. Now that we've peeled all our potatoes, I'm going to slice them up, and you can cut them however you like. I like a bit of a chunkier chip with my chicken chips and gravy, and you can also square them off so they are a little bit neater, but honestly, that step isn't necessary at all. Sometimes the more rustic looking, the better. So just get these edges and cut those off, and do that here as well. And then I'm going to cut that in half. And there you have some beautiful chunky chips. So I'm just going to repeat that with the rest of the potatoes. I've cut them into beautiful chunky chips, and I did do that squaring off method, so they are looking quite perfect. And now I'm just going to put some cold water over them, swirl my hands around, and remove as much starch as possible. And I'm probably going to need to repeat that step a second time, just until the water turns clear, so we know all of that starch is gone. I've washed those chips, the water turned beautiful clear. That tells me there's no more starch left in those potatoes. And now we're going to put them in a large pot. I'm using a Dutch oven today, but you can use any big pot that you have at home. And then I'm going to cover them with cold water, put a lot of salt in there because that's going to penetrate into the potatoes and flavor them beautifully. And then once we pop that onto the stove, we're going to start our timer. Not when the water is boiling, it's when it goes straight onto the stove. that's when you want to start your timer. And I think we do that for about 20 minutes or just until those potatoes are fork tender and you can easily poke them with a fork or a wooden skewer. I've drained my potatoes. They were boiling for 20 minutes, and that is when you put them on the stove, not when the water starts boiling. I know I keep saying it, but that is a very important step. And we don't get a visual of me draining those potatoes because my cameraman Tim and Lewis were out getting coffees and we're running a little behind. But I've taken them out and then I've just put them in a colander with a towel over them just to steam them a little. You don't have to do that step, but just because I had a little extra time, I'm doing it. And I'm going to lay them out onto a wire rack and pop them in the freezer and get them really cold. Keep them in there for about 30 minutes, and then we're going to do the first fry after that. We've got our chips in the freezer. They've had that first boil. I've got my garlic roasting, and while that's all happening, I am going to show you how to spatchcock a chicken. And that essentially means we're just going to remove the backbone and open it up, and that allows that chicken to cook a lot faster than if it were whole. And it's also really tricky in Australia to find spatchcock chickens that aren't pre-marinated. So this is a really great tip to have, especially if you're like me and you have less time at night and you need that chicken to roast a little faster. This is a great way to speed up that process. So I have this gorgeous organic chicken. I've actually moved house. If you haven't noticed, I'm in a new kitchen and I have a new butcher. And this is the most gorgeous chicken. I'm so happy I found him because I made one the other night. It was so juicy and tender. But we're just going to remove it from the package. So this one has its legs pre-tied, so I'm just going to remove that. And then we're going to flip the chicken over. So this is the backbone of the chicken, and this is the part that we're going to want to remove because we're essentially removing that backbone and then spreading the chicken open, and that's how we're going to butterfly or spatchcock it. All you need is a pair of kitchen shearers or kitchen scissors. So you can also use a sharp knife if you don't have these, but this will make it a little easier. So we want the legs facing away from us, and just run your finger down to feel the spine, and we're going to move just ever so slightly to the side of it, and we're going to start cutting. And this should be really easy to do, especially with these new sharp scissors I have. And then I'm going to repeat that on the other side. And there we have our backbone or our spine removed. And don't discard that. Pop it in the freezer and keep it for when you're going to make a chicken stock. And you'll see that those legs have opened up beautifully. And the last thing we want to do is cut through this cartilage here. So I'm just going to grab a sharp knife. And I'm just going to make a little slit in here. And then when I flip it over, give it a little break. There we have it. That is how you butterfly or spatchcock a chicken. It's really easy. Once you have that technique down packed, you'll be able to spatchcock every chicken that you buy and speed up that roasting process. Because we still have a few other things to prepare, like the garlic butter, and keep cooking those chips, I'm going to salt my chicken now, and what that does is it acts as a dry brine. So that salt is going to penetrate into the skin and just make it incredibly juicy. You could do this the day before and keep it in the fridge uncovered. That will also assist with that crispy skin. But I'm just going to do it now and leave it sitting on my bench top because I like my chicken to be at room temperature when I cook it. It just means that that meat isn't going to get a shock to the system, and that meat is going to cook evenly throughout. So just get some flaky sea salt, and you want to go quite heavy-handed on the salt here. And the great thing about butterflying a chicken is you don't have to flip it over or try and miss out on getting those thigh parts because they're already here for us. And then I'm also going to just put some pepper on it as well while I'm here. Whenever you're seasoning something, always pat it, don't rub. It's just going to get in there a lot nicer. And this is the baking tray that I'm going to use to roast my chicken on. So I'm just going to pop it on here now. And you'll notice it's a wire baking tray, and this is the perfect tray to be needed when making this type of chicken where you want all those drippings that you're going to use in your gravy. And yeah, I'm just going to pop it on my bench top and leave it while I prepare everything else, because having that at room temperature, as I said, is the ideal temperature for when roasting a chicken. That garlic has come out of the oven. It was roasting for 1 hour at 200 degrees Celsius. It's soft, it's caramelized, it's gonna squeeze out beautifully, but I'm just gonna pop it to the side to let it cool, just until it's cool enough for us to handle it and do that squeezing. And while that's happening, I'm gonna prepare everything else for the garlic herb butter. This isn't called a garlic herb butter for no reason. It does take a lot of herbs. I like to use sage, rosemary, and parsley, and I'm gonna finely chop those up and then add them to the bowl with the butter and the garlic and just season it with a little salt and pepper. So we need about 20 grams of parsley, finely chopped, about 2 tablespoons of finely chopped sage. And it is important that we finely chop it, because otherwise those herbs are going to burn in the chicken when we roast it. I think that might be enough. And then I do about 1 tablespoon of finely chopped rosemary. So that's about 1 to half a sprig. All right, now I'm just gonna chop that up. All right, that is looking pretty good to me. Those herbs are really nicely finely chopped. So I'm just gonna add them to my big bowl. And then I've got 1 whole stick of butter, which in Australia is 250 grams. And I'm gonna do a whole stick because, as I said, it's perfectly fine to make this in a large batch. It's so handy to have in your fridge. So just to give us a little bit of a head start, I'm gonna finely cube this. Oh, it's beautiful and soft, which is exactly what we want. I'm gonna add that to the bowl as well. And now it's time to squeeze that garlic in. Just a little salt and pepper. And now I'm just gonna mash that up with a fork. And this is why it's important that that butter is at room temperature, because you want your fork to be able to easily go through it. All right, and that is perfect. You'll see that that warm garlic assisted with melting that butter a little bit as well. So you can pop it in the fridge to make it a bit harder, although I think this is a really good consistency for when we're going to spread it onto our chicken. Those chips have come out of the freezer. They're not frozen, but they're very cold, which is the exact temperature that we're looking for. And now we're going to do that first fry, which is at a lower temperature. It's 140 degrees Celsius to be exact. And we want to fry them for about 8 minutes just to get a little color on them, because this first step of parboiling gives you that soft and fluffy interior. And these next 2 steps of deep frying them gives you that crispy golden outside. So in my opinion, the perfect chip. I usually use a neutral oil to deep fry with a little mix of olive oil, but I have way less neutral oil than I do olive oil, so we're just gonna see how we go. So that oil is at 140 degrees Celsius, and it will drop a little bit when we put our cold chips in there. So just keep an eye on it. And I'm just using a slotted spoon to very carefully lower them into the hot oil. Now this is the exact color that we're looking for. It's not too golden yet. Just remember that this is our first fry. Even Lewis, my cameraman, was like, I'm waiting for them to get really golden in color, but that comes at the second fry. We just want to slightly cook them on this first fry, And you'll notice I did it in batches as well, because we have to be really careful with that hot oil. It can overflow from the pot. So if you're a little bit concerned, do it in 2 batches. All right, and back in the freezer these go until we're ready for that second fry. We need a few vegetables to roast our chicken with, and this is why I said before that this is the perfect tray to roast a chicken for this chicken chips and gravy, because you'll see that you can take the chicken off and then you've got a beautiful roasting tin, and because that chicken is sitting on that wire rack, all of its drippings are going to drip down into here onto these vegetables, and it's going to create the most delicious tasting gravy, which I'm going to show you how to make as well. So I'm just going to do some onions, which I'm going to quarter and peel. And these don't have to look beautiful or anything like that, because they're really just there as a flavor enhancer. You can eat them, but I like to just have them there for my gravy. And then we want 2 carrots. Just roughly chop those, throw them in. I want half a lemon. Because that's going to add a beautiful zesty citrus flavor to all this stew. And then of course we have to have some garlic, so I'm just going to cut those in half. And then a few extra rosemary sprigs. And I'm going to season it with a little salt and pepper. A good amount of olive oil on there as well. All right, so that is the vegetables and the herbs and the garlic all prepared for our roasting tin. And now let's spread that garlic butter all over that chicken. So firstly, I'm going to stuff the chicken with that garlic butter. This just helps get that breast super, super juicy and tasty. And I promise you, you will never have such a juicy tasting chicken breast in your life if you do this step. So we just want to separate the skin from the breast meat. And the best way to do that is to grab this part, get your finger under there, and it should just really easily separate. And repeat that on the other side. And then probably about 2 big tablespoons of butter in there. Just massage it in. Just push it all the way down. Okay. And now, because that butter is at a beautiful room temperature, I'm just going to spread it on top. Get it all over the thighs and the legs. All right, now I'm going to pop it onto the roasting tin. Another good generous drizzle of olive oil. And now this is going to go in the oven. I think it's about 40 minutes. I'll have to check that. So I checked, and it's actually 200 degrees Celsius, which is about 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And we're going to do it for 40 minutes. So this is going to go into the oven now. Now, these wouldn't be the best chips without some chicken salt, which I have found out is a very Australian thing. So basically, chicken salt is made with a few spices, but the main ingredient is chicken stock powder, or I think in America you call it bouillon powder, but you just need a high quality chicken stock powder to make the best chicken salt. And we put it on all our chips here in Australia, especially if you go to the chicken chip shop. You want those chips with that bright yellow chicken salt on them, because you know you're in for a treat. And it's really easy to whip together. I'm going to make a big batch because you can keep it in your pantry, in your spices cupboard for months on end, and just sprinkle it on everything. And if you're not Australian, you'll understand why we rave about this stuff. So this is the chicken stock that I use. It's a Marcel chicken stock powder. It's actually vegan, so it doesn't have any chicken in it, but I think it's the best one out there. And because this is the star of the show, you need 3 tablespoons of this one. You want about a tablespoon of onion powder, a tablespoon of garlic powder, and again, you can mix this up a little bit as you like. There's so many different chicken salt recipes out there, but this is how I like to make mine. You want just a touch of sugar for that sweetness, about half a tablespoon or a teaspoon if you want a little less, some white pepper, and then some salt. Because that chicken stock powder is quite salty on its own, don't feel like you need to use too much here. I'm just going to mix that all through. Just gonna break down those big brown sugar clumps. And there we have it, chicken salt, very nostalgic for me to eat as an Australian, and it is so easy to whip together. We are up to our second fry. That oil is at 190 degrees Celsius, so it's a bit higher from when we did the first fry. And this is where we get those golden and crispy chips. So just carefully lower them in with a slotted spoon. I reckon I can do this all together. So that's been roughly 5 to 6 minutes. They're looking good to me, and I'm going to remove them. Oh, look at that beautiful golden color. Is that the color you wanted, Lewis, in the first fry? He's nodding his head. We've done well. So as I said, the second fry is where you get that gorgeous color. So I'm just going to leave those to drip dry, and then we're going to put that gorgeous chicken salt on them, give them a toss, and serve them with our chicken and gravy. Those chips have been cooked 3 times. We had that boiling step, the first fry and the second fry, and look at how beautiful, crispy and golden they are. Just have to give a moment for that sound. Now I'm going to pop them in a bowl. And because these are our chicken salt chippies, I'm going to put that chicken salt we made on here. You want a fair whack of it. Just going to give it a toss. The chicken's come out of the oven. It is beautiful, it smells delicious. So I'm just gonna set it to the side and let it rest while we prepare that gravy. All right, so we've got that pot on the stove. I'm gonna scrape all that deliciousness off the bottom. And these vegetables are fine to eat with the chicken as well if you want them, but I don't know about you, but I don't want vegetables when I'm eating chicken chips and gravy. All right, now I'm just gonna get out as much as I can, and then I will strain that later. I'm gonna add about half a cup of white wine, then about 1.5 cups of chicken stock, maybe a little bit more. I'm just gonna bring that to the boil and let that cook for about 2 minutes, just to infuse all those beautiful flavors in there. And don't worry about the veggies. I am going to strain this, but I do like to keep them in there just to get that extra flavor. Oops. So I'm just going to add a corn flour slurry to thicken that up. It's about 2 teaspoons of corn flour with about 1/2 cup of water. So we're just going to stir that through just till it's at a consistency that we're happy with. I've taken the gravy off the stove top, and I'm just going to strain it now just to get rid of all of those vegetables and those herbs. But as I said, you can keep these to eat if you do want that as well, just so they don't go to waste. There we have our beautiful gravy. All right, so we have made all our components. I know this one is a little bit of a labor of love, and it's so easy to pop down to that chicken and chip store and get this pretty much for 10 bucks and straight away, but this will be the best chicken and chips gravy that you'll ever eat. So now what we need to do is plate up. Because we've spatchcocked that chicken, it's so easy to slice up. Just go down the middle. And then I'm going to go for a thigh. Oh, look at how beautiful and juicy. And then I'm going to cut up some of this gorgeous breast meat. Oh, and you can see that garlic butter oozing out. And this breast meat is so tender, it's just falling off. And then we can't forget those chicken salt chippies to go with it, of course. I'm going to do a very large, generous serving of them on this plate. And last but not least, that gravy. There you have it, the perfect chicken chips and gravy. And now there's one final thing to do, which is to eat it, of course. So I'm just gonna go for these chips. And I love when my chips have been soaking in gravy. It makes them really, really delicious. Perfection. I'll get a bit of chicken meat as well. That is really yummy. Now, if you liked this recipe, please follow, like, and subscribe. Your engagement means the world to me. And if you make it at home, let me know in the comments. I absolutely love hearing when you make my food. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.